Welcome back to another action-packed episode of the Deadly Podcast, Kung Fu, brought to you by the Builds Man, where myself, Justin Raymer, traverses the world of Marvel's most prolific martial artist and Iron Fist Shang-Chi and the White Tiger. If you want to keep up with the podcast, you can do so over on social media platforms, Twitter, X, Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky. If you want to keep up with myself, Justin Raymer, you can do so over on Twitter, X, Instagram, and Threads, and Blue Sky. If you want to listen to me and my friends play some TTRPG podcasts such as Dungeons & Dragons and Star Wars, please subscribe and follow Last Tavern on the Left wherever you listen to and follow Deadly Podcast Kung Fu. My characters are currently helping the White Lantern Liu Kang protect the center of the DC multiverse where the Rock of Eternity lies from the Black Lanterns, whose members consist of everyone that has died in this campaign, and then some. So if you love a good time, if you love listening to TTRPGs, if you love comic books, please check out the podcast Last Tavern on the Left wherever you listen to Deadly Kung Fu Pod at. Now today we have a guest advertisement. Before we get started on the comic book at hand, today I have my son Draven, also known as in this house Bubba.
So, you have your own King Kong.
Yeah, I have my own King Kong, and that's kind of what we're here to talk about. Bubba, you have your own YouTube channel. What is it called?
Bubba's Crazy Dinosaurs.
And what do you do on your YouTube channel?
Open stuff up.
What kind of stuff?
Godzilla and dinosaurs.
And what do you and Dad do?
Fight.
Fight? Okay, yeah, sometimes we fight with the dinosaurs, but what else do we do with the dinosaurs and Godzilla toys?
We play stuff.
Yeah, we also review them, don't we?
Yes.
Do you have fun doing it?
Yes.
So this is our advertisement for Bubba's Crazy Dinosaurs on YouTube. So search Bubba's Crazy Dinos. Make sure that you like, subscribe, and what else?
And ring the bell.
And ring the bell. Thank you, Bubba. I love you.
Love you.
No, isn't he the best? I love that little boy. But today, we're going to go ahead and talk about some Lin Lie on his road to becoming an Iron Fist, as we're going to talk about the King in Black tie-in Black Knight. Now you're probably thinking, why is Dane Whitman tied to King in Black? Well, it's one of the best stories of that event. I wasn't very big on the main event, King in Black, like the main series, but a lot of the tie-ins were pretty interesting, and this one is really good. Now you're probably also wondering, why is Lin Lie in this book? Well, the reason why he is just as interesting as why Black Knight is tied into the event. And that's what we're going to dive into. And I've discussed some of this book before Undead Iron Fist hit shelves, and maybe thought some of the stuff in there, how it would tie into Lin Lie's story. And we're going to dive into that today. So let's go ahead and get going. King in Black, Black Knight was released on February 3rd, which is the day I'm recording. It'll be released here on the 4th. 2021 with 74 titles from Marvel. I am not covering all those. That is insane. Usually I've got like 8 or 9 when I do a Bronze Age book. So what I'm going to do is, there are 12 titles from King in Black, not including this issue. If you wanted to read them, they are King in Black number 4, King in Black Black Panther, King in Black Gwenom vs. Carnage number 2, King in Black Marauders, King in Black Namor, Volume 4, King in Black Planet of the Symbiotes, number 2, King in Black Return of the Valkyries, number 2, King in Black Return of the Valkyries, number 3, that don't sound right, King in Black Thunderbolts, number 2, Sword, Volume 2, number 3, Symbiote Spider-Man, King in Black, number 4, and Venom, Volume 4, number 33. Now, there are 2 issues in regards to this podcast that have come out, which are Iron Fist, Heart of the Dragon, Volume 1, number 2, and The Legend of Shang-Chi. Which both of them are also in the King of Black storyline. And one day I'll get to those, maybe when we hit Knull, at some time, maybe if he shows up in the MCU, or when I get to that continuity. But otherwise, yeah, I'll get to those at some other point in the podcast history. So the creative team of the story is Simon Spurrier, Pencils, inks, and colors go to Jesus Saez. I'm hoping I say that right. Letters are Corey Patet, and your editor is Tom Groneman. We have some amazing covers. The first one is done by the talented Dan Mora, which sees Black Knight stabbing the ebony blade into the head of one of the symbiote dragons. The next one is done by the artist himself, Jesus, which features a Black Knight with a wall of symbiotes behind him with Aero and Sword Master. And then the second sees all three of them standing together, ready for battle, with Knull looming over them by Benjamin Sue. One of those covers will probably be used for the podcast. Let's go ahead and dive into that story. The spirit of Sir Percy of Scandia breaks Dane Whitman from his meditation with the ebony blade to warn him that the Avengers are calling. Knull, god of the symbiotes, is heading to Earth, and his dragons are invading ahead of his arrival. His ancestors warns the Black Knight that the sword knows of the Elder God, and that he should be wary of the blade. Ignoring the warning, Dane flies off on Gladriel, his Pegasus, to battle. Finding himself caught in a furious battle with one of the dragons, the ebony blade impales the symbiote. This creates a connection between Knull himself, allowing the entity to enter Black Knight's mind. Within, he looks across the cursed bloodline and discovers the truth of the sword. As the blade comes free, the dragon breaks apart and becomes part of a living abyssal shell around the earth, with others of its kind, leaving Dane to fall to his doom. Black Knight is saved by Aero as he discovers he has found himself in Shanghai, China. The city is under siege by more of the symbiote dragons, and she and the Sword Master are trying to stop them. Both debate if they can trust Dane due to his history of insanity, while he tries to summon the ebony blade to his hand. As Lin Lie explains he should be concerned about Chi-Yu and not the current crisis, the sword of Fu Shi flies into the hands of Black Knight's grasp. Despite Sword Master demanding that Dane give him back the sword, he's unable to let go of it. Instead, he decides they need to retrieve the ebony blade. As they fight their way through Shanghai, Black Knight loses control and butchers a symbiote dragon beyond recognition. Again, he tries to release the sword of Fu Shi, and it doesn't work. Lin Lie goes to take the sword of Fu Shi from him as the tendril of the dragon slithers up the blade. Knull enters both of their minds, revealing more truth about the curse of the Black Knight to Dane while revealing to Sword Master what Chi-Yu actually is. This causes the sword of Fu Shi to flare with green energy, burning Dane's hand and allowing it to fly back to Lin Lie. Unfortunately, the telepathic intrusion gave Knull an idea. He summons the symbiote dragons to take Chi-Yu's form, allowing him to project his consciousness into the body. As he goes to retrieve the ebony blade, it tears through his hand and flies to Dane. Refusing to take it, Sword Master and Aero waste no time attacking Knull. Seeing their attacks are not enough to stop the symbiote avatar, Dane summons all the darkness in his soul. Empowered beyond recognition, he soars towards Knull. The collision causes a massive explosion among the skyscrapers of Shanghai. Aero is impressed that he killed the god of symbiotes, but Black Knight reminds her that the real Knull is in New York City. Together, she flies herself, Lin Lie, and Dane to the final battle to save the world. I love this story. I think this story is great. It dug me down a rabbit hole for some current Dane Whitman stuff around this time. And we're not here to talk about him. This isn't a podcast about him. There probably needs to be, because this is some interesting stuff. But he is often a forgotten character in Marvel Comics, much like he is in the MCU. And what's around this story is pretty good. You should read Black Knight, Curse of the Ebony Blade after this story, I should say. And then there's an X-Men crossover during Death of Doctor Strange. For this, symbiote Spider-Man King in Black ties in with Dane Whitman as well. So I recommend reading all those. It's pretty interesting stuff. And this whole story that we learned about the Black Knight during Ebony Blade is really good. But like I said, this is not the podcast for this. We're talking about Sword Master Lin Lie. So, in the Masterclass Shang-Chi backups in the Sword Master comic, which are in the first 6 issues, I didn't talk about those when I covered that series. I'm kind of saving those once I get to the Agents of Atlas stuff. This is where we start to see Lin Lie focus on finding his brother Lin Fong and his missing father. But like I said, that all ties more into Atlantis Attacks. It's for a different story. But like during his run with Agents of Atlas, he never really talks about any of this. It's not until that story that he does, and that's kind of like in the middle of the Agents of Atlas run. So before, we don't hear really nothing. After he leaves, so okay, let me just back up here. So we have Sword Master. It's all about him. Then he joins Agents of Atlas. And then we get that during War of the Realms in its own series. And then in between that is when they released the Sword Master series in English. And we got the Masterclass backup with Shang-Chi. That takes place after that. And then before Atlantis Rising. Atlantis Rising, he's not really worried about Chi-Yu. And then we get this book, which is where he starts to focus on it. So it's pretty interesting. I love the back and forth between Aero and Lin Lie on if they should even trust Dane Whitman due to his history of being a madman amongst the Avengers. But this is where things get really interesting. So he is not wanting to help with this fight. Aero asks him, "What are you doing here, Lin? Isn't it obvious these monsters, they're minions of Chi-Yu. Chi-Yu, you mean the god of war from the epics? Who else but Chi-Yu could send these demons? The heir of the sword of Fu-Shi must face them. I will vanquish the legions of Chi-Yu. I will find my father." And then he's fighting it. She says, "I'm assuming you didn't get a message from Tony Stark. Stark, the Iron Guy? Of course not. I'm not Avengers adjacent. Honestly, I think all these American heroes are nuts. He's not the one fighting an imaginary enemy. These monsters aren't from Chi-Yu. They're from space. Not Chi-Yu, but then there's no point of being here." What? I mean, you've got this, right? You're Aero. All this saving folks stuff is second nature to you. That's why they love you. That's not going to do anything. You should help. You should. Look, the Fu-Shi sword isn't some toy to wave at bad guys in masks. It has a noble spirit of its own. It is solely to defeat Chi-Yu. That's the opposite of noble. A hero thinks of others first and themselves second. There's nothing more noble than... Then she gets cut off by Black Knight because he's trying to summon the ebony blade from this building. And all of a sudden, the sword of Fu-Shi leaps out of Lin Lie's hands and into Black Knight's hands. And he's like demanding to give it back. "Please give me the sword." "But I didn't take it. It just came to me." "Sword, now, please, now." "I can't. It won't let go." "I'm going to guess the noble spirit in your sword disagrees with your idea of how to behave in a crisis, Lin. Give me the sword back." And this is where all this gets really interesting. He says, "He's not even holding it right." Oh no, he looks over his shoulder. Here's this old lady. One of the symbiote dragons comes. Lin goes to shield her with his body. Black Knight jumps in the way with the sword of Fu-Shi. Cuts it. Aero kind of makes a smart remark. "No point of being here, huh?" And he says, "The sword, how magic is it?" And he says, "It's not magic, it's divine." We'll get to that in a second. Well, anyways, Black Knight goes to town on this symbiote dragon. I mean, butchering it. Basically, he's giving in to everything that's in the ebony blade, but he's wielding the sword of Fu-Shi. After he gets done butchering it, "Fu-Shi sword, now," is what Lin says. "No, I need it. I'm just borrowing it until I get mine back. It chose me. Ugh, why does this feel so heavy?" "I think it's trying to unchoose you," is what Aero says. "No, it's mine," and he stabs it into the ground. Lin and Aero look concerned. He walks over, grabs the sword. "Give it back, or..." He says, "Get off," and then the symbiote swirls up it, and we get some of the most interesting panels in this book. The art and the color in this is so freaking sweet. So, for the second time in this book, Knull enters Whitman's mind. We're not concerned about that. We're going to see what he sees in Lin Lie and what he tells him. And this art is beautiful. We get Dane Whitman screaming. The bottom of him is Lin, and it looks like he's straining, like he's in pain. He's all weaved into Knull's hell, who's like smiling evilly. And Knull says, "I was looking for your little black sword, Whitman, but I see you've brought me a bonus. How generous. Another star-forged thing, another world ender you worms can barely comprehend. Chi-Yu, is it? Ha ha! That's your obsession? Just one more elder shadow dressed in local legend, but such an attractive form. So we're seeing Lin Lie, and he's standing with the sword. Chi-Yu's all in his face. He's looking all menacing. And above Chi-Yu, we have Sidorak, gives the Crimson Gem to the Juggernaut. We have Khonshu, who champions the Moon Knight. And then we have Shumagrath. So, the question is, are these all like the same beings, kind of like Knull? Is Knull just saying, or maybe they're just lessers to Knull, but they're still like that powerful? Because we know that Khonshu is an Egyptian god, but here it says he's an Elder Shadow. So, so like all these things are more cosmic beings. Maybe that's why this Star-Forged weapon can hurt them, which kind of leans into more of the Ebony Blade being a Star-Forged weapon, given the history of it, and kind of like Mjolnir, Thor's hammer, and we'll get to some of that here in a second. But the imagery with this is great, and basically, this causes the Sword of Fushi to burn green with energy. It burns Whitman's hands, he screams, and then it flies back to Lin Lie. It's fine, I'm here. You weren't to know he's evil. So, there's this whole thing here about being worthy. And I guess the thing is that Lin Lie is still learning to be a hero. And he does not want to fight this battle because now he's like laser focused. And the sword senses that. And the bad thing about this is at this time, even through the Agents of Atlas, the Sword Master story, that's a masterclass in those books, after he becomes Sword Master to those points that he actually, I would say, joins Marvel Comics, we don't know what his training is with the sword. We don't know what he's doing with Ji Shuang Shuang and the Nuwa clan, what training he's getting there. He just shows up, start fighting off Cinder's minions from Niflheim in War of the Realms. We have no clue what happens in between that and what his understanding is of the sword at that time. But here, based on what we're seeing, is it leaves him because he's not wanting to fight a worthy cause. It doesn't see him as worthy, but it sees and senses that Whitman is worthy because Whitman actually wants to do something, and it leaps to him. And this is what gets interesting about that. Aero says he's worthy, and then she says he's unworthy. Earlier in the book, there's this whole point about magic, and we kind of learned this in the Masterclass story. Ares steals the sword from Lin Lie and Shang-Chi, and Shang-Chi says that's why he stole the sword, but he can't tap into its ancient powers without its true owner. Ares says, let me get this straight. You're saying only that punk can wield the sword? What makes him so worthy? Not a bad question. But all you need to know is that without him, the sword's just a hunk of metal. So you need to be worthy to use it. In a way, kind of like Thor's hammer, except for you cannot pick up Thor's hammer, I guess, unless you're uber freaking strong. You got to be worthy to use the abilities of the sword. And that's even more interesting because here in this book, Whitman cuts down the dragon. He says, this sword, how magic is it? It's not magic. It's divine. Not fit for a crazy psycho-American. Give it back. So, the sword isn't magic. It's divine, and that makes sense. That would be two different types of energies, I guess. Because magic is Doctor Strange. Divine is what you would get with, like, Odin and whatnot, which would be more of what Thor's hammer is. It's divine, and maybe that's why there's a worthiness to the Sword of Fushi, which means I guess the bands of Nuon would be, you have to be worthy to wield those as well. And I think that's a very interesting concept within Marvel because there's so many people that wield magical weapons and magical items. They can use magic, but divine, as he puts this, as Lin Lie does, is you have to be worthy of wielding it. You have to prove yourself. And so to me, that shows that there's a clear difference between divine magic and eldritch magic, which is like something Doctor Strange or Doctor Doom would wield. And I think that's interesting. And it's like the only time it's come up in this whole book because, like I said, Ares had the sword. Shang-Chi was using the sword. Like, Ji Shuang Shuang was using the sword in the Sword Master series. There's other people that's used the sword, and even Dane Whitman here, but to them it's just the sword. It's not the power. And we learn about that power because when Knull takes the form of Chi-Yu, which looks so badass in this book. He looks amazing. He looks kind of like a knight in black armor, for a lack of a better term. He's kind of looks like Chi-Yu, except for he's got that Knull face, that big toothy grin and everything. It looks awesome. And when Lin attacks him with the sword and cuts him, he says, "Ah, the light," which kind of plays into the end of King in Black with the Unipower being Captain Universe, Venom turned in and all that, the light. Just kind of dives more into this divine power and what the difference between divine and eldritch magic is in the Marvel Comics. But we kind of get this truth about what Chi-Yu is, and I'm very curious if we're going to dive into this some more. That he is this elder shadow dressed in a local lore. And like I said, that's very interesting. I can see that throughout the primordial, hyboreal ages of Marvel. That, it's just an alien being, an entity that came to Earth to try to enslave it somehow. And became a local legend. Which we look at, it's kind of what you would assume with Khonshu, because Khonshu is so connected to Earth, but someone like Sidorak, however you want to pronounce it, and Shumagrath, they're not. They are legit considered interdimensional beings. They're not from this plane of existence, and they're always trying to conquer this plane of existence from their own dimensions. Kind of like Dormammu. Makes you wonder if Dormammu is something like this. Well, I guess. But it's interesting, and I wonder if we're going to dive into that, because during Lin Lie's time, we're not learning anything about any of this anymore. It's like we go to Sword Master, he's going to train with the Nuon clan, and all of a sudden, boom, he's a Marvel Comics hero. He's fighting in War of the Realms. He joins Agents of Atlas. He's fighting Atlantis, and then we have this. We're not learning, like, they've completely forgot a lot about his backstory until this issue. So, and even to this day, to this point on the podcast, like, we still haven't got much more into it. And that's why we're moving into Deadly Hands of Kun-Lun. Because I was hoping that Undead Iron Fist would tie into this, but so far it's not. It could still. We still got a while, at least 5 issues to go for all we know, but it says it's going to wrap up Lin Lie's story, and I want more about this, because this is awesome. And the art is incredible. This color scheme, oh man, it's like all these blacks and shades of white and light blue, and to dark blue, to kind of describe this mind journey that Knull's taking through everybody's history, and which is cool because, like, he's just reading their minds, but it's almost like he's traveling their bloodline, because both of these characters have this rich bloodline that takes them all the way back to when their magical swords were created. So there's a common bond between these two. And honestly, I wish there was kind of more about it in Marvel Comics now that I think about it like that, because I didn't think about that when I was writing all my notes for the episode. But yeah. Well, Knull, literally, he's like, hey, let me show you how far in your past I can go, because, I'm the big, bad, older entity in Marvel. Let me show you and go all the way back. And literally, these characters have so much in common, except for the Ebony Blade kind of deals a curse to you. But yeah, I didn't think about that, and that's pretty interesting. And the thing is, we also know from that Masterclass story that, like, the Asian culture and their gods have been around a lot longer than at least the Greek gods. So I would assume that they've been around anything that's Arthurian, tied to Camelot and like King Arthur. So obviously they've probably been around longer due to that. So I'm very interested in that, and maybe that's a connection that we should have kept going, or maybe once Lin Lie's story is over, regardless if he's Iron Fist or back to Sword Master, and if the sword is whole, maybe we can take that trip again and like explore this, because now I think about it, I really like that idea. But that will wrap up this episode of the Deadly Podcast Kung Fu. If you like the podcast, please follow it on social media accounts, Twitter, X, Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky. Go to YouTube, subscribe to Bubba's Crazy Dinos. My little boy wanted to do this YouTube channel. It was all his idea. I didn't want to, because I felt like it's not like we're doing it for money. We're not making any money, and everything, but like I didn't want to do it because like, I felt like I was exploiting my child. But my wife, you know, she was like, hey, look, he really wants to do this. Just do it with him. You know, it's like your father-son thing you guys can do. And it took me months to kind of break, but I finally did it, and he is having an absolute blast. He just doesn't realize all the work that's got to go behind it, and that's what Dad's got to do. So if you have a young kid and they like watching kids talk about toys, please subscribe to Bubba's Crazy Dinos on YouTube. While you're there, you can also check out my music, which is titled Rushing Tiger by Kuro. Follow him. Like that video. But most importantly, guys, support your local comic book shops. Go find this back issue because I don't have this, and I'm going to go look for it myself and keep reading comics, guys.